Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Robles' Renegades, where on this show we show off different custom parts, custom figures, and sort of just world world building display pieces that I personally will be putting in my collection, and stuff that I would kind of recommend to people if they're trying to build certain types of collections, teams, etc. I also highlight or try to highlight different creators in the space or different customizers in this sphere because this hobby is about being positive, right? So it's positive that we lift each other up and support each other as customizers and creators and figure collectors. So the first things first that I'm going to actually get into is this guy right in front. This fella right here. This is a custom iceberg made by G.I. Joe Customs on Instagram. I commissioned this from the gentleman because I had seen him make one on his personal Instagram account, and I thought, wow, that's a really good figure and a really good custom. And since my dad and I had come back from Joe Fest 2023, that maybe a month or so earlier, no, this was maybe this was a while afterwards. I can't remember the timeline exactly, but I saw this and I asked him if I would be able to commission him for two iceberg figures, one for myself, one for my father. He took my commission, and then here we are. The parts I can't really pin down. I know this is from the Snow Viper, this is a Valaverse gun, this is a Valaverse gun, and then some of the parts are probably kit bashed from like 6 other figures, plus 3D printed parts. I can tell that the snowshoes down here are resin printed from the bottom here, where it looks like there were sprues connected to it. But this is generally a really great figure, and I know that when Hasbro finally makes one, that I'm going to be getting that as a companion piece to this, because this is such a important figure to me, because it highlights a really fun time in my life where I got to experience not just going out of a different state, because that's not always in the cards for us, or me specifically, because I'm not a fan of flying, but because I got to meet so many mutuals and acquaintances and friends down there. I got to meet Ken Poe of Toy Connections, Ryan from the 3POA podcast, Bobby Valla and Tony Roberts from Valaverse and Analog Toys respectively. I got to meet Michael French and Master Son 42 and all these other lovely, lovely human beings. And those are memories that are going to be part of me for like the rest of my life, I'm pretty sure. And and sort of just sticking on the G.I. Joe theme, not to ruin that sort of sentimentality there, because I don't want to get too sappy on camera, because then I'm going to wind up crying. So, to move on from that and stick with G.I. Joe, we've got the 60th anniversary. Gotta stand this guy up a little bit. Action Soldier. Now, I actually modified this Action Soldier a little bit. He has the Mark II Designs M4 rifle, because I'm not a huge fan of the double barrel M4 he came with. It just looked a little goofy and gaudy, although I did keep his light machine gun, because, I kind of wanted to have at least something that, one of the original weapon systems with him. Although I wound up... Darn it. My apologies, this table is not at all a stable piece of furniture. In fact, the screwing mechanism, the threads, are sort of just starting to get a little stripped out, because I had to move this thing so often. But to get back onto the figure, I wound up keeping more than just his LMG, because he still has his standard sidearm, which I was kind of a fan of, because it looks fun and unique. It almost looks like a... Come on, if the camera could focus. Come on. It almost looks like a hybrid between a USP and a Beretta. Or it might just be a USP and I'm kind of dumb. But I really do like how that sidearm just looks with the figure, especially in that coyote tan. And then, of course, he still comes with all of the usual accessories, with some added slings for, of course, the rifle and the light machine gun. He still has his dog tag, his handful of pouches, his command pouch, magazine pouch, medic pouch, and rear pouch. And then he also still has his helmet, as well as the sort of downed neck piece for his poncho, which, in keeping with old school G.I. Joe tradition, since, there would be a few ingenuitive ways for the old Hasbro team back during the heydays of G.I. Joe, the moving action, the American Fighting Man, they would use stuff like rubber bands or bungee cord or small little cords and stuff to hold certain pieces of equipment to the figure. So I just decided, you know what, there probably isn't any other, there's probably a better solution, but I only have rubber bands. So I tried bundling it up and sticking it on the backpack. Originally I was going to try and put it down here, but it just kept sliding up, so I was kind of forced to put it up closer to the bag itself. And for one of our last two... Ooh, that was user error. You're going to see me save this live. We're going to keep this in, too. Maybe we should have put Bigfoot up here. Maybe we should have put Flatfoot up here. But, yep, we also have the Recon Diver. And to complete the set, I will be also getting the Marine and pilot, the parachutist. The sniper and the parachutist, my bad. As well as the second parachutist to make a Marine, a male action Marine. So that kind of sort of more fits in line with the original core for G.I. Joe figures, although I'm still a fan of the female action Marine, don't get me wrong, she looks like a total bad bitch. But, obviously, we added a sling to his rifle as well. This camera is one of my favorite and least favorite accessories, because it will always keep falling out of this thing. But once it's in there, it holds pretty well. Another thing I'm really a fan of these figures is they can hold most of their gear, like, he still comes with that harpoon gun that came with Torpedo and the eel, although this one's slightly straighter than the eels. I don't know what was up with that one. Tip's going to be firing a little bit around corners, but, at least you can fudge it a little bit. These were one of my favorite figures from 2024, although I will admit that the range of articulation wasn't great on the necks, but for what they were, I thought they were really, really good, especially since they were anniversary figures, and they celebrate that history and story behind G.I. Joe, and more or less respect the legacy of what came before it, even though this guy came with a gaudy weapon system, and this guy's camera keeps falling off. And then as for our last member of the Joe team, was a figure that I was kind of excited for, other than, Shooter, but that's a different story for a different time, was Big Ben. Dig, nabbit. He's gonna be sleeping. There we go. We're leaving that in, too. But, Big Ben was was another figure that I was kind of excited for, because I haven't been a G.I. Joe fan that long. I grew up during the Hasbro movies, as well as the G.I. Joe Renegades era, so I wasn't into G.I. Joe like a lot of other kids were. I was solely into Star Wars back in the day, because Clone Wars was on television, and I could either choose to watch Clone Wars at its 8 p.m. time slot, or I could choose to watch G.I. Joe Renegades on what used to be the Hub. That's what it was called. It was called Hub, and it had a bunch of different cartoons plus Discovery Channel programs on there. I swear to God, at its like a 6 or 7 a.m. time slot. So obviously I chose Star Wars over G.I. Joe. But this is more or less actually inspired by Tony Roberts, who broke down this figure as if he were actually in like SAS selection. Obviously, the one thing I couldn't change was the belt buckle, which, I kind of was whatever on, but everything else I more or less kept the same with a few additions. Like the light machine gun is a custom 3D print from Antero's Customs. The bullet bandoliers are from Range Vipers. I forgot where I got those, but you can find them on Mercari for everywhere. These two radios are also from Antero's Customs, with this being a more or less standard long-range radio, and this one being a Joe Pro radio because Ben's original chest rig with the original bandoliers had a little Joe Pro thing right here, which I, painted black to look as an IR strobe, and then I removed it entirely. And then because of Tony's video, he says it's a Night Force character. Why does he have the white fur lining on the hat? And I thought that was a really good point, so I went ahead and painted all of that green. That way he would be able to camouflage better when dealing with Cobra. I also went ahead and gave him a new the Valaverse drop leg holster, and actually I gave him Grunt's sidearm because when I looked at it a little closer, it didn't look like any other handgun that had come previously, but it reminded me more of a Browning High Power, which was used during the SAS Operation Nimrod, the Iranian embassy. So I thought that would be a good little throwback to the history of the SAS itself, as well as, since Palitoy had made the SAS core figure, as well as the SAS core figure line and accessory sets, I thought that would be a little fun thing to add to Big Ben as sort of a tie-in between Joe and Palitoy. I also added a Valaverse drop leg med pouch, which was from Desert Rat, and I switched out his and Outback's boots. Outback has his original jungle boots, while he has Outback's boots, which required literally zero tampering outside of switching them around. So it's just a normal fit. As you can see, the articulation still works, so right, we still have him. And then I also gave him a spare Valaverse backpack filled with, I think, another pistol, a detonator, some C4, and then a tertiary radio. Because if I'm gonna give somebody gear, I'm gonna make sure they go all the way. Especially considering that, Ben should be one of the best soldiers in the modern military, so obviously he has to have the best gear. And as for these three in the back, these actually have a story behind them. I know somebody's been looking at these like, what the fuck are those? Are those like commanders or something? No, these are from Teflon 3 on Instagram. These are his security steel brigade. I think this is Night 3 or Night 1. I can't remember which one, but this is one of the nights, as well as Night 4, I think. Let me double check. Yep, that's Night 3. As you can see, the 3 designation on his helmet. And this is also a Knight, but I cannot remember what her designation was. And actually, I would like to talk about this for a second, because Bobby Vala recently did a video, talking about customs and bootlegs versus ready for retail product. And to touch on the bootleg thing first, I personally have a bootleg Leon Kennedy based off of the Resident Evil 2 reboot video game. I would love nothing more than to give Capcom my money for an official Resident Evil 1-12 scale action figure line. But they are not doing that, so I kind of just have to go with a bootleg company. Which, obviously they can't do that legally, and, that could probably hurt jobs, but I'm a little bit more lenient against it. Something like Capcom, which rakes in billions of dollars, versus a smaller company, let's say Grindstone Toys or something, where they're raking in maybe a couple million or a couple thousand, maybe over the next few months or something. A small boutique company versus a large-scale corporation. I'm fine with somebody bootlegging a large corporation versus a smaller corporation, if that makes any sense. Because, the smaller guy's going to lose a lot more money than the bigger guy. But as for customs, I would like to address Bobby personally on this one. If somebody makes something like this, a custom figure of your line and wants to put it within the story that they've made for their own enjoyment, I would see that as the highest honor possible. Because regardless of how much product you release and how often you're releasing it and what you're releasing, people still want to have so much more of that franchise, more of that story, more of that synergy in their collection, that they're willing to go ahead and make it themselves and just put it right next to all of their other stuff. Like you guys have seen my custom bell for my Call of Duty stuff. You guys seen all of my Call of Duty stuff. I've kit bashed them with McFarlane figures. I've put them next to my short-lived Jazzwares run. I have, obviously, more custom Action Force stuff. My Zombie Slayer Eclipse. And since I'm going to be getting another Vanguard, thanks to that Brush Guard kit, you guys are going to be seeing a lot more of the sort of zombie stuff later on. Especially since I've been collecting base bodies like corpses for different uses with different customs. But I would see customs as like a huge honor because people love it so much that they want more of it. Like, yeah, they're still going to buy your stuff because, at the end of the day, there is no like Night 3 for the Steel Brigade. There is no night program. There is no security officer Steel Brigade. There is no security officer Steel Brigade because those just don't exist in the Action Force line. But people are willing to make those just so that they can have their enjoyment, so that they can have more enjoyment, with that line. So that's why I'm very lenient towards customs, because they're not supplanting the original line. They're not supplanting any material made for it. They're adding on to it. It's always an addition, never a subtraction or a replacement. Which is also why I have 3 Action Force customs in front of us today as well. Like this guy. This is the Dragon Soldier, based off of Legend of the White Dragon, which, as of the recording of this video, has yet to premiere or air. I made it with a re-release Bone Collector upper and lower, or a re-release Bone Collector lower. Obviously, I got a little too excited and accidentally broke the hip because I didn't want to risk damaging it any further. I went ahead and just Gorilla Glued it. So yeah, obviously the articulation isn't going to be great ever, but he's just going to be standing there menacingly right next to my custom Dragon Prime, which I'll get to in a second. Obviously his upper body is Dragon Prime along with a Swarm Horde body armor vest, because of that Swarm Coney Trooper I showed off in a different video, and then he obviously uses the Dragon Prime helmet and the Dragon Prime arms, and comes with a Maxim 9, because in my head these guys aren't really frontline soldiers. They're more like a Secret Service kind of thing, where they're right there ready for action again to protect like a New Colonia VIP, which you can obviously tell from the signet on the chest. Speaking of New Colonia and Dragon Prime, we have this Dragon Prime custom right here, based off of the actor and owner of Bat in the Sun Productions, Aaron Shirka. As you can tell, I've used the upper from that previously mentioned Bone Collector, as well as a Series 1 body armor vest from the Security, or the Riot Gear set. And yes, it is a Series 1 vest, because, infamously, I cannot get these closures to go closed. And just because I thought, like, Dragon Prime just because of the expression on Aaron's face, I sort of see Dragon Prime as more of a calculating yet arrogant character. I don't know how the character actually is. The movie isn't out. So I gave him the M4 with the long barrel and scope, as well as the Bone Collector Desert Eagle. to go with the rest of his black body armor, and as well as the dark gunmetal highlights on the different little dragon armor pieces. I also took a few of these metal armbands, or sort of faux metal armbands for the white dragon figures, and slipped them onto the Bone Collector arms. Now, I wasn't really thinking when I did this the first time. I just sort of warmed them up and forced them on there. And yeah, they look fine. But if I had to do this again, I would do what I did with White Dragon, which I'll show you in a couple seconds. Obviously, he doesn't really have much, but that's because I didn't think he would carry much. He carries his knife because I feel him as a more mobile character. Like he takes pot shots at Action Force soldiers, and he repos, and then he does it again, and he does it again, so that it's hard to get a beat on this guy until they eventually start shooting at his location. Then by the time they do that, he's gone. So that's kind of what I think of as this character here. And speaking of the White Dragon himself, I'm going to move Iceberg a little bit so that we have better access to the man himself, the man of the hour. We have the White Dragon, Jason David Frank, the late, great Jason David Frank. Obviously, he has his helmet and his goggles. So yeah, he comes with his helmet, his ear protection, and obviously the night vision goggles, as I stated before, very shakily, as well as his Scar rifle, my bad, with a black sling, because I don't have a white cord. I might replace that in the future, as well as the white SMG that comes with the base figure. He's pretty much just kitted out in the standard issue gear, although I did notice on the side of his head he's got this little number designation. I don't know if the camera will focus. Well, I don't know if that's just for the factory, or if that might have been a sample that might have gotten out into the wild somehow, or if all of them have it. I haven't looked at the other heads that I have, because I bought 3 of these sets. One to have a normal White Dragon and Dragon Prime, one to have a Unmasked Dragon, Prime and White Dragon, and one for these. And then obviously he's got his silver and gold arm guards, which I actually decided to do something a little bit smarter here, because as you can see from his arm here, there's carve marks. I whittled down the width of the arm so that these could slide on a little bit easier when, heat was added. Obviously, if I had to do this again with Dragon Prime, I really, really would, because it's a smarter thing to do than just slip them on the folded sleeves and then just call it a day. It's less of a hassle. And then obviously he comes with his backpack as well, which is just full of extra gear. It has the Peltors, and then, let me see. Yeah, Peltors and Shema in here. Nothing really too extravagant, but that's because I wanted it to be more of a general custom, or a more subdued custom, because White Dragon doesn't seem to be sort of a boisterous character to me. He seems more reserved, more quiet, and very, very willing to be in the thick of it with his men. So he's just more of he's a leader, not a commander. That old meme where it's just like a guy at the back of the line just shouting at people to pull him, versus him pulling with his men, And that's how I really see him. Speaking of a commanding officer who is always in the thick of it with his guys, let's move White Dragon up so that we don't knock anything else over. We have Colonel Alejandro Vargas from the 2022 iteration of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. He uses a lot of parts. For example, he uses the female desert kit for these two right side or left side mag pouches. You can tell because of the darker brown almost like a wood brown paint on the mag pouches versus the 2 mag pouches that are here from the Desert Condor vest. His whole body is the version 2 of the Garrison Cavalry Soldier, where I had to paint it with a darker skin tone. You can see from right here where I missed some paint where the original was. And then, of course, because I had to get these extra pouches on here, I had to move the knife. So I took a little bit of inspiration from the in-game model and moved the knife onto his back. And there goes Iceberg again, because I have fat hands. Oh boy, let's go. So yeah, we have him with his knife, him with his radio, and then I also gave him the intervention sniper rifle. Now, unfortunately, I can't remember for the life of me where I got this rifle. I'll put his name in the video and in the description below, but I can't seem to remember where I got this sniper, and obviously it's going to shoot around corners, but that's because I didn't store it properly, and I have a rubber band as the sling. So obviously that's going to get changed later on, and I'll post an update like I did with my Christian Craighead custom. But as of right now, he's pretty much complete, including with his G36, which I'll have to say right now isn't technically a G36 in this context, because during the mid-2010s, Mexico had a deal with Heckler & Koch where they would buy G36 rifles for the Mexican army to use. However, they decided that it would actually be a little bit cheaper to produce their own rifles. So they took inspiration from the G36 and made their own MX. I think it's the MX-27 line, which was so close in construction to the G36 that Heckler & Koch not only sent their gunsmiths down, but also sent a few lawyers down to inspect the rifles part by part, every single piece down to the screws. And they found that despite being similar, that these were 2 different rifles, which is just amazing to me personally, because I wonder how the hell that happened. Oh, wow. So that's what my sealer does when it's cold. I'll have to repaint that, but obviously this figure is going to go really well with the other 2 that I made, and this head is actually available right now from Hot as Fuzz Customs on Instagram. If you go to his website, you can go under the Call of Duty Heads tab on his website, and then along with Valeria, Ghost, Soap, and a handful of others, you'll be able to find Mr. Alejandro Vargas. So that'll be always a fun one to get, whether you want the character himself or you want somebody to look sort of menacing, whether you want somebody to be a named character or just somebody in the background to look cool. And then as for these 2 right here, they're actually just companion pieces to my Batman, and I'll explain why in a hot second. But first things first, I want to tell you where all of his awesome gear came from, like this Bat Claw. Obviously, this is not the McFarlane Bat Claw. It is way more in proportion to the Batman himself. This is from a gentleman called not King of Customs. That's where the cape came from. This is from Bearded Skull Studios. There is a Batman Arkham accessory set, which includes the line launcher, a pair of hands with smoke bombs, a pair of relaxed hands, a pair of fists, of obviously this Bat Claw, and the explosive gel with a small explosive gel in the shape of a bat, which is just the most fun part of this accessory set, and the reason that I got it for this Arkham Knight Batman. It just looked so perfect, and I really wanted to I wanted to build my own Justice League with my mind's eye. So obviously for Batman I had to go with the most iconic outside of the animated series. So I went with Kevin Conroy's portrayal in the Batman Arkham series. But since the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League suit isn't made, and pretty much hopefully I kind of hope it doesn't get made because then it'll have the purple eyes and the veins all across his face. So I went with the Arkham Knight Batman because that's pretty much like the best option considering how sleek the suit is. Obviously, you can tell there's a little bit of pizdets on his armor, but that's because I kind of messed up with a bunch of with some super glue. Same thing with the cape. I messed up with some super glue, and now it's permanently stuck like this. But I'm probably going to be removing this cape anyways because I found a better representation of the Arkham Knight cape from the same gentleman. So this will probably be donated to a different Batman later on. But it's super, but it still flexes well enough to the point where you can still hit all the poses that you want with it, even with the glue spots, which I sort of more or less attribute to a fun little damage that he got through that Halloween night. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm building my own Justice League, so I need a Wonder Woman, which for my mind's eye that would technically be Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. Up until we see what James Gunn's DCU has to offer, that's going to be who it is, especially since the more comic accurate Wonder Woman that Todd produced goes for $100 or so on the secondary market, and I'm not paying that for one fucking figure. Especially something that comes with a few accessories and should have been released like right off rip. It took us like maybe up until 2022, 2023 to get an accurate Wonder Woman from the comic books, so that's why I'm going with Gal Gadot instead of that other one, because it's affordable, it's good enough, and it's, it's really still accurate for what it is. And then, of course, since I'm building a Justice League, I need to get some of their Rogues Gallery too, so Joker for the Batman. I'm waiting for a more appropriate villain for Wonder Woman because I don't know if Cheetah was ever released, and I don't know if Cersei is ever going to get a figure, so I just have to wait until Todd makes a Wonder Woman villain that's, worth a damn. But yeah, that is everything for this episode of Robles' Renegades. All the purchase links for the figure, or for some of the gear, is going to be down in the description. Social media links are going to be down for everybody who was mentioned in the video, Antaros Customs as well, because he obviously designed the GPMG, like I stated earlier, hopefully. G.I. Joe Customs, because of the iceberg, and etc., etc. As well as purchase links for King of Customs Mercari page for the Arkhamverse capes. I just bought another grapnel gun from him, so I can have a more action-oriented bat claw versus a static bat claw for my displays, as well as Bearded Skull Studios for, obviously, this awesome equipment set. Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe for more content. Purchase everything if you feel like purchasing it, and follow whoever you want to follow. I'm not going to say for you to follow or purchase from anybody. If you want to buy some of the stuff that I showed or commission some of the people I commissioned, obviously go ahead. It's a fun time to do. G.I. Joe Customs is a great fellow, and he makes really good stuff. And Hot as Fuzz Customs is just a generally great guy. He's a bro, and I talk to him almost regularly. Thank you guys for watching. One love. Stay blue.